Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Utah Aviate podcast. It's episode 4. Today we've got Connor on. He's one of our CFIs. I'll have him introduce himself here. Obviously, don't forget to like and subscribe. Let people know about the podcast. If you are an aviation enthusiast, that's all we're talking about. It's aviation. So,
Love it.
don't forget the merch shop if you want shirts, polos, hoodies, hats. Might have some Yetis on there soon. It's utahaviate.shopify.com. Don't forget to go buy your stuff. So, all right, let's jump into this. Connor, introduce yourself.
Awesome. Well, I'm happy to be here. I finally made it onto the Utah Aviate podcast. So my name is Connor Jensen. I have been a CFI for about a year and a half now. And I've been flying for the past a little over 4 years. Apart from aviation, I love being outdoors. I love hanging out with my friends and going camping, but biggest part of me is obviously aviation takes up my life right now. So
Love it. Have you done all your flying in Utah?
I have not. I did most of my flying, most of my training has been done at Utah Valley University. And then I did some training out in the Midwest in Ohio for my CFI and II. I went out there and did that. So
Cool. Awesome. And you're from Utah?
from Utah. Yep.
Born and raised?
Born and raised in Utah.
Awesome.
That's right.
You married?
I'm married. I guess that's a huge part of my life as well. Yep. I've been married about 3 years and we're expecting a baby in June. So about a month out.
That's awesome.
We're super excited.
That'll
Yeah.
be super cool.
Thanks.
So, all right. Let's just talk about your flight experience just a little bit. I've got some hot topics to kind of go over and your opinion on some things. But so how many hours you at? How long did it take you to get there?
Yeah. So I am just over 350 hours right now. I started my training in the fall of 2021. So kind of right after, yeah. And it's been kind of on and off, honestly, since that fall of 2021. And then I got my CFI about a year and a half ago, like I said. So, yeah, it's taken me a couple of years, but it's been a great experience. I haven't had any regrets at all. So
It's good. And you did all your training, most of it, with UVU.
correct.
So
Yeah.
Part 141.
Right.
We talked about that on the last podcast, kind of like the differences of Part 61, 141.
Mm-hmm.
What's your experience, going through a 141 program and then now training, being a CFI for a 61?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that going through the 141 program, starting private, instrument, commercial, I didn't really know what any different experience would even look like going through. It was kind of just what I thought everybody went through. And so because of that, I don't think I really noticed bad things or good things. I just thought it was normal for everybody. And so looking back now, I see a lot of really great things with 141 and a lot of things that are certainly disadvantages compared to 61. Biggest advantage, and I think you guys talked about this last time, was scheduling. And for UVU, at least, you're scheduled for private pilot, you're scheduled about 3 times a week, set times at like my first for private, I was scheduled at 7 a.m. Monday, Wednesday, Friday.
Nice.
And so we would get there. He would require that I got there 45 minutes early. We did like weight and balance. We went over like what we were going to do. And then we'd fly for 2 hours and then be done. And if weather happened, then we just canceled for the day and then waited for the next Wednesday or Friday.
Yeah.
And so that was a huge, it was much more structured for sure. We had stage checks. There were 3 different stage checks that we went through for private where another advanced CFI would come and evaluate your progress. They would do an oral portion that lasted about 2 to 3 hours. And then they would do a flight portion, which was like an hour, 2 hours. And they wouldn't let you move on in the course unless you had passed that stage check. So actually, for my first stage check, I failed twice, and I just had to redo those flights, spend another $1,500 on trying to pass that stage check, which was good for me. It's good to have those learning experiences. But for me, at least when I was first starting out, I think that it would have been more advantageous for my CFI to say, hey, let's do another lesson that's outside the syllabus and work on a couple of things before I send you off to the stage check. So much more structured, part 141 versus 61. And then, of course, there's all of the classes that you have aside from the aviation, um, the direct aviation experience that you have to take. That's just kind of part of the program.
And now you were going in for a degree originally, or
Right.
were you wanting to be a pilot and then like you could get your degree on top of it, or were you going in for a degree and then you were like, well, might as well get, my pilot's license with it.
So I thought about getting my pilot's license for sure at the very beginning. That was like my dream ever since I was a kid, is to be a pilot. And so I talked to a couple of people, and they had recommended that I also get my degree apart from my licenses, my certifications. And so and UVU just had a program to do both.
Yeah.
So that's kind of
Yeah.
the route I went.
And they have a good program.
Super great.
Anybody looking that wants to get a degree and learn how to fly, they're nice. One, they, you can get your flying all through them, but
Mhm.
they also accredit anybody who has their license from someone else, which is really cool.
Right.
Not a lot of schools do that. But yeah, like you said, so in terms of scheduling, you said Monday, Wednesday, Friday, right?
Mhm.
Um, from your students that you currently have, would you see that more beneficial for most, or do you like you can schedule any day, every day, different times of the day? Like, how do you see that working for students?
For my
Yeah,
students right
your
now.
students specifically.
I think that it does depend a lot on the student. Sometimes it's better for students to have a rigid schedule. Hey, this is what every week is going to look like, and just schedule out your week accordingly. Um, but what I find is I have a lot of students that are older, that are 40 plus years old, and they have a lot of conflicting things going on in their lives. So it's really nice for them to be able to say, hey, I can't fly these days, but I'll fly this day at this time. And then we just make it work that way.
Yeah. Now,
Flexible.
were you working as well as going to school, or?
Yeah. Yeah, I was. So, yeah. So I was taking classes full time. I was flying, 3 times a week. I was doing the ground class that they have apart from that, and then working full time as well. So
Or were you working? Just curious.
I was working at a Mexican restaurant.
Okay.
Yeah, I was a
Like a
waiter.
server, or?
Yeah, I was a
Okay,
waiter.
cool.
Yeah.
Very different.
Very different. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that's a lot of the questions that we get from anybody who's looking to join the flight school or
Mhm.
any flight school,
Yeah.
in general, is like, can I do this while working full
While we're
time?
For sure.
I'm sure going through 141 with like UVU where you're getting a degree, that limits your time even more
Yeah, for sure.
versus just a pilot's license, right?
Yeah. And I was working, I think I said full time. I was working part time for sure. It was more like nighttime. So I would have classes in the mornings, or I'd fly, and then I'd have classes throughout the day, and then I'd work usually
Yeah.
in the evening.
So, recommendation for people looking into flight school, would you say it's doable with a full-time job? They got to pay their bills, right?
Right.
It's obviously a little bit different. Like when you don't, like, you were just freshly married,
Right.
don't have a kid yet, like someone coming in who does have kids, or, has a career already,
Yeah.
is a 141 an option, or would you just kind of shy away from that in general?
Yeah. I think it definitely depends on your ability to um, delegate workload and to handle the workload that you have, that you need to have. You need, like you said, you need to earn money.
Yeah.
You got to live. And so it depends a little bit on the person. If you are very busy, 141 is definitely not for you then. Because a lot of times, like if you have to cancel for weather, for maintenance or whatever, then it's just tough luck.
Yeah.
I mean, I have a couple of, so I'm also currently working as a ground instructor at UVU. So I have 20 students right now working with them, doing private instrument commercial. Um, and a lot of them, especially during the winter months, they haven't flown in a month, and they're just kind of stuck there because it's hard to find time outside of your flight slot, because there's other people, and then your CFI also has other students, so it's hard to schedule with them. And so if you're looking for flexibility, um, wanting to get your certificate while going to work full time, or if you have kids that take up a lot of time, then definitely I would recommend 61 for that.
Okay. When you're scheduling out your flights with a 141, so I don't know much about
Yeah, yeah.
141s, like and how like it works day to day. With the scheduling, are you able to pick slots prior to starting? Like I'm available these days. So like someone who does work full time or has a family, they can say,
Mhm.
okay, yeah, I'm actually available, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Can you guarantee me those slots, or is it just you're handed what they have available?
So I remember it was, and they might have changed it now, and obviously it might depend on the school. But for UVU, when I started, it was kind of a bit like they're like, hey, um, you know, commercial students get priority, instrument students. Obviously, all the instrument students flew at nighttime,
Hmm.
so they weren't
Silly.
really a factor. Yeah. And then private students got last pick. And so the sooner they had, like, hey, on August 12th or whatever, we have these different flight slots. You send us in what you would prefer, your first, second, third choice for that. And then whoever got there first
Gotcha.
got those flights.
So it could really not work
Yeah.
ever if you got a crappy slot or it doesn't work with your schedule.
Right. And especially in UVU's case, if you were a full time dad and you're working, there's very little chance that you could fly getting your private pilot's license after 5 p.m.
Gotcha.
It's just very
Yeah.
unrealistic.
Yeah. Which I guess that's why a lot of people, I mean, we get a lot of students who want to go get their instrument on
Hmm.
through like UVU or someone else.
Yeah.
So they come get their private with us. Is that kind of why? So I don't know, but from the students you've talked to there or your own
Hmm.
experience, like if you were to start instrument with, let's say UVU, do you get that priority or that, because you said commercials first priority, then instrument, then
Right.
private? Or because you're a new student, your bottom priority?
No, I wouldn't say, I don't think that they even recognize that you are a new student when
Okay.
you start instrument or commercial there. Um, that you're just kind of one of the names. And so they
Gotcha.
give you a time. And then if it doesn't work for whatever reason, then of course you can try and work it around. Instrument is much more flexible, I think,
Yeah.
than any others.
You also get done a little quicker because you're longer
Yeah.
flights and whatnot, right? So,
Yeah.
with so if you were to go, because it's semester based,
Correct.
right? So if you were to get, let's say only 30 hours in a semester for private, where
Hmm.
40 is required, what happens at that point? Do you have to redo flights? Do you just pick up in the next semester?
Yeah. Most of the time, if you haven't met all the requirements, you haven't passed stage checks or whatever else, the semester ends, they have what's called the last day to fly, which is usually 2 or 3 weeks after the semester's ended, where maybe like 2 weeks after the semester's ended, where that's the last day. And if you have to push it past that day, you better have really good reasons for it. Like your flight slot got canceled for weather, 12 times.
Yeah.
There's just nothing you could have done. There was maintenance. There was, your CFI canceled on you. It wasn't like your fault. You had to be able to prove that. And then you had a meeting with the chief and you talked about it. And then if your reason was good enough, then you just got pushed back into the next semester and you just kept going.
Gotcha.
Um, but they have recently instituted new policies where if it is your fault, then you just kind of get kicked out of the program. They give
Okay.
you a little bit of leeway, but that leeway is getting smaller and smaller as
Okay.
time has gone on.
So you're just out completely.
Yeah,
Now, I mean, you can finish up your degree, but you're out of the
correct.
flight program.
Yeah,
Okay.
and I've heard of people like trying to reapply to the flight program.
Yeah.
And I've heard of one person like going through that. I mean, it takes like 8 months to reapply,
Yeah.
get in, get scheduled for the next semester. And I've heard of like one person that has done that and gotten back in. But if your goal is to be a pilot, that's like, don't be so attached to 141.
Yeah.
to do that. I think that's a waste of time. And, um, and obviously, like if you kind of failed out of a 141, then it might not be for you.
Yeah. Now, the sign up procedure for getting into the program, is that a long process? Like, do they have a lot of openings? Do you get pushed off because like I mean, they only have so many airplanes, so many
Right.
instructors. At what point do you know that you're in the program versus like out of the program?
Yeah. So, right now you have to take the private ground class that UVU has,
Okay.
which is a semester long prior to um, your flight slot the next semester. So all of the ground students that I have already completed the ground. They've already passed their par, and now they're starting flights. So um, a lot of times, what I'll hear is people like private students will start that class maybe in the fall, and then they'll start flying in January.
Gotcha. And it's kind of guaranteed at that point,
Yeah,
or okay.
yeah,
Yeah, because I think there's a lot of, do I guarantee a slot? A lot of schools are full.
hmm
The bookings are full. They don't have enough airplanes for the amount of students coming in.
mm,
I'm sure they kind of run into that, maybe spring when there's a lot of backlog. I don't know. I would imagine if students haven't gotten through because of weather, December through February is terrible out here
right.
with flight time. If they're booked, would they just tell people to hold up for another semester and then start flying?
I've rarely heard that as a concern, honestly.
Okay.
In fact, I think, especially summertime, they always come around and they say, hey, fly during summer, because a lot of people take summer off
Yeah.
as a break because it's like school structured.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to get more students to fly from May to August.
Gotcha. Okay. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm a little biased. I would say go to a Part 61,
Yeah.
but if you're going for a degree, it makes sense to go to a 141. If you need the structure to keep you focused, also makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now we try to be as structured as we can here. Obviously, you have the syllabus. You that's how you treat your students.
Right.
Um, had Do you, with your own students, try to bring that 141 type structure to them? I mean, that's all you really know for the
Sure.
most part,
Yeah.
but, do you like the flexibility in your own instructing ability, or
To be honest, with my own instructing, I do like more structure. I remember when I first started and I texted you and I was like, hey, like, what should I do with my students today? And you're like, it's kind of up to you. Like,
Yeah.
what do they need to do? And so I think and again, it's kind of what I know, it's what I'm used to, but I like to say, hey, lesson 3 is about this, 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 and this.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to go up and do. And then a couple lessons in, we say, hey, you still haven't really gotten to the point where you can do this by yourself without any help from me. So let's re-practice that. But I would say I lean towards the structure a lot more for
Yeah.
sure.
I definitely like the structure. Coming from ATP with my training, they're 60, a 61 school, but
Mhm.
they're structured like a 141. Uh, and then going to my own instructing job to Modern Pilot, I was just very structured. My employer liked it, the chief pilot liked it.
Yeah.
Um, but it is nice where student does really terrible on steep turns. Well, you can take the next 6 flights if you need to do steep turns,
Right.
right? Or cross countries if they need a little extra time, like you're running into with one of your students,
Yeah.
right? If they just need more time in the plane, they're not held to a semester based or a time crunch. It's just, well, we just got to keep doing it until you feel comfortable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I agree.
with, so you, what was I going to say? When you went out to Ohio, that was for your CFI, CFII. Did you do your multi?
I didn't do it. I
Okay.
haven't done my multi yet, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
What was it like going out there to do that? Because I'm sure it was just like a crash course.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was doing my commercial at UVU, and one of the CFIs was like, hey, a lot of times UVU students will do private, instrument, commercial, multi, CFI, CFII. And she was like, I would highly recommend that you, once you finish your commercial, go out and do your CFII at the same time, because you're already really familiar with the plane. You know all the maneuvers. You've perfected them. You just did commercial.
Yeah.
Your ground is really good. You don't have all these other additional things for multi. And then she recommended an accelerated program in Ohio that I really enjoyed. But yeah, definitely a huge crash course. We had, so for this particular one, when I went, is Midwest Corporate Air, which was awesome. They have about 5 days where from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., they're just doing ground with you for 5 days straight.
Wow.
You come prepared with your tests already taken, your written's done. And then after that, you fly. And depending on how long or how good your flight skills are, they just recommend you for a check ride. So because I already had so much time in the Diamond, that was one of the reasons I went out there, because it was a DA40.
Yeah.
Because I had so much time, I did 3 lessons with my instructor, and then he recommended me for check ride.
Wow.
So I think I had 4 lessons done before I had my check ride. One of those being spin training.
Yeah.
I did my spin training at like 6 a.m. and then I took my check ride at 10 a.m.
Mm.
So it was extremely quick. And it was part 61. So it gave me kind of an idea for some other styles of teaching. But and a lot of people can't do accelerated programs.
Yeah.
You know, like it's way too quick. They're wanting to crank people through. The planes are flying 24/7. I think one of the DPEs there said that they got like a certificate from Diamond for the most hours flown out of any of their planes in the States, because it's just always flying. So
the accelerated programs are interesting because
yeah.
we get emails, calls of like, how quick can you get me done?
Right.
And I'm like, well, we can get you done as fast as possible.
Right.
If you're ready to fly every single day of the week, minus the weekends, or, and you have all your ground stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, yeah, we can do that. But the second someone actually gets into an accelerated program, I think they realize how much harder it is.
For sure.
And that was like ATP's big marketing thing was like, we can get you done in 9 months. Right. And I was like, but then when you actually talk to everybody there,
which is so interesting that they market that.
Well, we're like, yes, you can get it done in 9 months if weather's perfect and you time it out just perfect.
And your ground is great.
Yeah. Which, like I got mine done in 7 months.
Okay.
All the way through CFI.
Wow.
When mine timed out perfect, where like my instrument phase being down in Texas, my whole instrument phase was actual. Like I have, like by the time I got done, it was 50 hours of actual.
Yeah.
Because we don't worry about icing down there.
Crazy.
You can actually go fly through storms if you wanted to, which we did, which was, good experience for me. But, so I got mine done really quick. Definitely wouldn't recommend it for 90% of the people actually wanting to get their licenses.
Yeah.
What's the fastest you can get it done at like UVU?
So if you had, again, no delays with weather, no delays with maintenance, you never have to repeat a lesson, because they also have grading for each lesson. So like, a 4 is a perfect. And then for each lesson, it's like, oh, you need a 3 on steep turns. You need a 4 on airport operations or whatever else. If you don't meet those standards, you have to repeat that lesson.
Gotcha.
And so if you don't have to repeat any lessons, you pass all your stage checks, like for private, maybe 3 months. And that would be really impressive.
Yeah. Can you speed up through the flight training?
No.
No. So like you just have to wait. Once you get done with the rating, you got to wait till the next semester. Yep. Okay. So there's almost no point. Like,
yeah, exactly. There's no point in trying to blow through it. It's nice if you do everything perfect, obviously. Yeah. You don't spend more money and waste more time. But you have to wait until the next semester.
Gotcha. So the quickest is, what is it? 4 semesters? 3 semesters?
Yeah, for private instrument, 1 semester per rating.
Yeah.
So 3 semesters.
What is that? Semesters. It's a year and a half? Unless you fly during the summer.
Yeah, unless you fly during the summer. And sometimes CFI is a little bit quicker as well. Yeah. Most people, I think, get their CFI and II within 1 semester.
Gotcha. Okay. It's interesting. Yeah, I don't know much about that realm, and we've thought about doing a 141 program. I know why a lot of people try to have a 141 program, because of you get, VA loan qualified.
Right.
You can get different types of student loans for those. So, it makes a little bit of sense. We've looked into
less hours.
Yeah. So now that brings up a good point with the less hours, right? Because you finish with an R-ATP essentially, right?
Yeah.
Which, explain that to anybody who doesn't know.
Yeah. So there's restricted airline transport pilot. Air,
Yep.
right?
Yep.
So there's R-ATP and then ATP. Traditionally, if you finish Part 61 through all your ratings, then you have ATP. So you could be ATP certified, which means that before you can fly for an airline, before you can get your ATP, you need to have 1,500 hours in the airplane. So basically, you just have to get those hours by doing, a CFI or survey or whatever you're
Yeah.
planning on doing. If you have restricted ATP, then you only need 1,000 hours before you can apply to a regional
Yeah.
or whatever.
And then with your commercial, what do you end up with? Hours?
Um,
It's like 180.
I finished my commercial because I finished my CFI and double I think I had 184
Okay.
by the time I was done.
Yeah.
So
Which
I
for a
think,
normal, like 61 school, you finish at 250,
right.
and then, you're probably like 260, 270 with your CFI, CFII,
Yeah.
right? Which pulls up a big point. Like, a lot of people, they like that idea because they can get into the airline sooner,
Right.
right? 500 hours sooner, as
Mhm.
like on paper.
Right.
But, now where I have to deal with insurance on our airplanes, and
Yeah.
we ran into this with you,
Right.
was they see, yeah, he's a commercial rated pilot, but you're so low on hours, like I think our minimum was 350. We had to make an exception with you, get you named, like it was a process, right?
Right. Right.
I don't see like, at least personally, I don't know any airliner company, anything that would hire before 1,500 hours. So does it make a lot of sense to get, I mean, like, I don't know the benefit at this point to having R-ATP.
Well, and the interesting point here too is that um I think it is beneficial, but like you said, a lot of times, like I'm on a couple of Facebook groups right now where they're like, yeah, I have 2,000 hours. I have 200 of those are multi hours. I have like all this cross country and IMC time or whatever it is. And I still can't find a job. Like still am getting rejected. It's been like a year or 2 years.
Yeah.
And that terrifies me. And I'm sure it terrifies a
Yeah.
lot of people, you know? I think that if you become the best way, if you have restricted ATP, is if you become a CFI at a 141 school, at a partner school
Yeah.
for one of the regionals, because like UVU, which is interesting, they kind of promote that they're a partner school for Breeze and Allegiant, which they are. But you have to be a CFI at that school in order to be on that pathway program to them. So a lot of times you think like, oh, I went through, like I thought for a while, I went through UVU's program and now I can apply to be a cadet for them and kind of have that as my pathway. Well, if you're not a CFI for them, which there's 10 CFIs, 15 CFIs for 200 students or whatever, I don't know
Yeah.
how many students they have. Like those are your odds of being on the pathway program. So restricted ATP is great for those CFIs.
Yeah.
A lot of my buddies are.
Now, are they getting higher, or are they getting higher job offers at 1,000 hours, or do they still have to wait to 1,500 for insurance purposes?
No, they like most of my buddies that are CFIs at UVU have gotten hired at about 800 hours and then just waited until they hit the 1,000 and then they start training.
Gotcha. Now, are they training them through 1,500 or 1,200?
I'm not sure about
you
that.
know?
Yeah.
That'd be interesting to find out, because it's like, well, yeah, like you're hired. I guess you're getting paid because you're on salary.
Right.
So I guess it doesn't really matter
Yeah.
if you're just looking to get there sooner. Now, but then looking at it sooner, most places that offer R-ATP are in a school program.
Right.
And like you said, you have to go through each semester.
Mm-hmm.
So where, like, at a 61, you could get it done as soon as 7 months.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're a CFI getting paid flying to your 1,500 hours, versus if you go through 141, you're at a year to a year and a half before you're even licensed.
Right.
Right. To start working.
Before you can get paid for anything. Yeah.
Yeah. So now you're almost guaranteed a year and a half at one of those programs. Right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like,
right.
Because it's structured that way.
Right.
Again, like, a year and a half versus 9 months to 1,500 hours, like how quick, I'd like to see the numbers of like how, like the timeline to 1,000 at a 141 or 1,500 at a 61, where you can start working and flying every day, doing 8 hours a day, 10 hours a day, whatever.
Yeah.
if you can.
Yeah. For most of the CFIs at UVU, I think they fly between their CFI there for like a year, year and a half, pushing it 2 years as a CFI before they get hired on with an airline. So I'm not sure, like in
So
a
you're
61.
so you're a year. Let's just call it a year for your
Okay.
licensing, and then maybe another 2 years of CFI flying. So you're 3 years as a training and trainer
Right.
before you're hired.
Right.
Where if you were to go to a 61 and you're able to get that amount of hours, that's the hard part, right? Getting the hours.
Right.
I mean, I did 1,000 hours in a year. So
Which is
I'd be
impressive.
at
That's tough to
1250,
do. Yeah.
I'd be at 1250 in a year and 9 months, essentially.
Yeah. And I think it really depends on like where you end up being a CFI after.
Yeah.
Especially like here in Utah County, like I had such a hard time finding a job. I looked here for a while. I applied 3 different times to UVU. That's why I started to be a ground instructor there, because they were like, oh, maybe next semester, but the ground instructor's open, and a lot of times we hire from our ground instructors,
Yeah.
so go ahead and do that. Which wasn't true, because I've been there for like a year and a half and I still haven't been offered a job.
Yeah.
I kind of stopped applying though, but uh, Utah County is really hard to find a CFI job.
Yeah.
Especially for new CFIs. So I started looking elsewhere, and I got a job offer in Connecticut, and I'm like, wow, is it worth it to move out there? And how many hours am I going to get there? And so I think it depends a lot where you go to be a CFI is also going to give you, like, it depends on how much hours you're going to get there.
Now, when you were applying to these other places,
Mm-hmm.
obviously the one in Connecticut, you couldn't go in person, but
Right.
what would be your recommendation or tips for people that are applying to other places?
Yeah.
Because I remember how you applied, you called in, that you came in, right?
Well, I rented the aircraft.
Oh yeah, that's right. You came in,
Yeah.
you rented the aircraft, you said, hey, I'm a CFI, and then you sent in your resume. So
Yeah.
that's the big, I have this gripe with everybody. I got a resume today on email.
Uh-huh.
Don't have a picture, don't have a face, like they forgot their phone number. I'm like,
really?
delete, it's gone. I'm not even going to look at it,
Right. Well, and in the aviation world, we hear this so many times, but like networking is key, right? Because I remember with you, I had rented the plane, and I don't even remember if I think I may have asked if you guys were hiring or something, but it wasn't like on my mind really.
Yeah.
Because I kind of was looking outside of Utah County at that point.
Yeah.
And then you called me and you're like, hey, you have your double I, right? And I was like, yeah. And he's like,
oh yeah, we had that one flight.
And you're like,
yep.
well, come on down. Let's do an interview. I'd like to talk to you more about maybe a job opportunity. Yeah. And so it was because I rented the plane that was even an opportunity. I mean, a lot of times, people just send in their resumes and they get thrown in the garbage.
Yeah. This has been the trend on the past couple podcasts was Scott said the same thing. Katie said the same thing. I've said the same thing, is like the more exposure you have to other pilots, programs, operations out of airports, there's just a fluke chance that we needed a CFI that day, and you came down, you were willing to come down and fly. I think you were in like Heber or something. You're like, but oh no, I'll make it work, and that's what we want to see as employers, my last employer at Modern Pilot, he was like, if you get asked 2 questions, do you want to fly? Always say yes, no matter what you're doing.
Right.
And do you want to eat? Always say yes. So 2 good tips, and they've never done me wrong,
Yeah. Which goes back to what you were saying about getting as much exposure as possible. If you are going through training, like I have some students right now that fly 2 or 3 times a week, and they don't really they have jobs, but they are completely unrelated to aviation. If you are starting off as a private pilot, I would definitely highly encourage that you get a job at an airport.
Yeah.
Like go to Provo and see if they need a line person. The more exposure that you get with airplanes, the more people you're going to talk to, the more connections you're going to make, the more you'll understand about airport operations. It's just going to triple the amount of information that you can digest.
One of our other CFIs, he would just go hang out at the airport, and he got a few side CFI jobs, and flying with the guy in his jet. He got a TBM or whatever, it's just, if you're around, people will want you in your airplane. If you're nice and kind and, not a burden on them, obviously.
Right.
But I think people they go so wrong on just like I need to apply to 100 different businesses, right?
Hmm.
Flight schools and see which one calls me back. Well, chances are you're not going to get a call
Right.
back, right? Go to the place.
Right.
Even if you're looking out of state, go take a trip to Arizona. Go
Yeah.
there's what like 300 schools in Phoenix it seems
Right.
like those places that fly a lot because the weather's good.
Yeah.
That's what it was down in Texas. I think every airport in Houston, which there's like 60 in the Houston area, had two or three flight schools.
Yeah.
It's like you have to go in. You
Yep.
got to make an impression.
Yeah. Give them your resume with your hand, not over email, and
Yep.
shake their hand.
Yeah. Here in Utah, I think the number was there's like 1,500 new commercial
Wow.
pilots a year
In Utah.
in Utah.
Hmm.
But then you think like, okay, well, there's probably only 10 schools in Utah, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Yeah.
Like, and most of them probably are in the range of like 2 to 3 CFIs per flight school. So the amount of positions even available in Utah does not equate to the amount of people getting their commercial certificate.
Right.
So you need to stand out some way or another,
Right.
right? And go take 10 days, go walk into every single operation possible,
Yeah.
skydiving, flight schools, there's a lot of options out there.
Yep.
But that's the big question. I get emails, I get Instagram DMs of how do you get from that 250 to 1,500
Right.
in the most cost effective way. One, the most cost effective is getting paid for your hours.
Right.
And then how do you get that is the other question.
Right. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is like you have to have those relationships prior. I was lucky, honestly, but prior to reaching your 250 hours.
Yeah.
Like you gotta most of the CFIs that they hire at UVU were already working dispatch for them or something for them, right? And so they had relationships with these chief pilots. And so when it was time for them, they got their CFI, and then it was just an easy hire for them because they already knew them.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I applied um, when I had my commercial check ride scheduled when I applied for Modern Pilot.
Hmm.
I sent him my resume. I told him, look, I'll have it done in 2 weeks, my CFI in whatever 2 weeks. I'd love to
Cool.
come work for you. And it worked, and I bugged
Yeah.
him every couple days,
Yeah.
like, hey, did you get this? Did you get my email?
Yeah.
I went in. Luckily it was like 2 blocks from my house. So, I was like, I'm always passing your airport. I think this would be awesome, and that worked,
Yeah.
and we just did a CFI check ride for another guy, and he went down to Provo and walked into every single flight school there, and he got
Yeah.
hired at a small one. They
Yeah.
only have one airplane, kind of like us, and you know, made an impression. They liked him. He got hired.
Yeah.
So, I just can't stress it enough to people who are looking for jobs. I see those forms like you brought up, like, oh, I'm at 2,000 hours, can't get a job. And it's like, I mean, what are you doing to get that
Right.
job? Right.
Right.
Are you just submitting resumes? Because if you're just submitting resumes, you're not going to get hired.
Right.
You're just another 2,000 hour applicant. Right.
Exactly. Exactly.
Like, because I know people who are getting hired at 1,500 hours right out of the gate.
Yeah.
Like they're already working. They're flying every day.
Well, and I think that's a huge benefit. Like I have two buddies that are CFIs at UV right now that are about to go to Breeze, and like their instructors are all now captains at Breeze.
Yeah.
Like they're all flying there, so they get great recommendations. It's all just who you know in the aviation world. So you got to be an extrovert.
Yeah.
Or if you're not, then you just got to push yourself.
You gotta get out of your comfort zone
Yeah.
a little bit. So now, this is a question that I came across the other day. Is flight training getting too expensive for the next generation of pilots?
It's a good question. Yeah, I think money is very interesting. I've learned a lot about money being a CFI here. I'm used to all the UVU students are college students that have loans, and here I've had a couple of students that are like, yeah, I'm not worried about the money. So it's been an interesting thing to kind of navigate that. I don't think so. I think that it has been compensated. So what I mean by that is that prices are obviously going up for training, but they're also going up for the airlines.
Yeah.
Like 15 years ago, being a first officer at a regional, you got like 30 grand a year. It was horrible. Now, most of them are paying like around 90, 100 even.
Yeah, well, the most recent update, which was in February,
Mhm.
the average starting pay is actually 140
See, yeah, that's
for a
crazy.
first officer.
Yeah, that's crazy.
That obviously you're going to get some of those low ball ones that they're a lot lower,
Yeah,
but yeah, I think the majority of them were above 120.
right. So if you can keep it to the offered price, like here for private, is
Yeah,
just over 17. If you can do your best to stay on top of your training and keep it close to that price, then you'll make that in the first year of being at a region,
yeah.
you know?
And a lot of them, what a lot of people don't know is the bonus that they offer.
Right.
Right. So you might like those lower paying ones. I know they start you at 90,000,
Hmm.
but they're also offering like full school reimbursement,
Right.
which could be up to $120,000 bonus.
Yeah.
Right. At some of these that I know of.
Yeah.
So like, yeah, like you said, yeah, I think it's very expensive to get into. When I talk about how much I've spent on
Hmm.
flight training, everybody's like, what? You don't even have a degree, like I'm not a doctor or a
Right.
lawyer or something. And it's
Yeah.
like, well, yeah, but like starting pay is more than my training,
Right.
like at most places. You got to do the grunt work as a CFI, but
Yeah.
it equals out in the end, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. I completely agree. I think too, uh, pitfall that a lot of people fall into is they're really nervous about money and they're like, oh, I got this $40,000 loan that's 9% interest or something crazy that is hard. Like there's no getting around that for sure. Um, but don't cut your training short because of money,
Yeah.
right? I think that sometimes people go up and they're like, no, I don't need to fly before my check ride. Like, I don't want to waste more money on that.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, okay, like it's your decision at the end of the day, but I would much rather go up to my check ride. And I'm like, yeah, I flew yesterday. Or I flew this
Yeah.
morning and I'm ready to go.
Yeah.
Like I aced the standards.
Yeah. Well, and if you fail your check ride, one, you spent money on the check ride,
Right.
which are $1,200
Hmm.
average. And
You got to retrain
then
with
you
your
got to
CFI.
retrain. That's mandatory by the FAA.
Right.
So that's another $1,000.
Yeah.
Then you got to reschedule your check ride, which is going to be another $1,200.
Yeah.
I mean, just yeah, it don't. And what I see that like the people are super nervous on money, which I was because I was I had to make my house payment, I had to pay for my family stuff. We just had a baby,
Right.
like so. I mean, formula is super expensive.
Yeah.
Like I had to make all my bills and still pay for flight school. So I get being in that position, but yeah, like you can't be uh poor, I guess per se, right? Poor
Hmm.
mindset to go through flight training.
Yeah.
And I think that's where the passion versus opportunity comes in.
For sure. For sure. And there's always also a sense of like frugality. You don't want to be, oh yeah, like let's just go up and fly around
Yeah.
and just burn money. You're like, and if you have the money to do that, great, good for you. I was never that way. I was always like, no, what are we going to do? What are
Yep.
the standards that I need to meet so I can prepare? And let's go up and do it. And if we need to do it a couple of times, great. If we need to repeat the lesson, that's fine too. But I'm not going to
Yeah.
waste my money and time up there.
Yeah. And I think that's good coming like you as a CFI where you can relay that to your students.
Yeah.
You're not looking to go waste their money either,
Right.
because you were in that position.
Yeah.
Same with me. I was in that position. I'm like, so with all of my students, I was like, hey, look, we need to get this done.
Mhm.
I don't want you to be the, 180-hour private pilot student.
Yeah.
Which I've seen them, and like if they want to be that one, that's fine. Cause some students are like, oh, no, this is just for fun,
Right.
but, I think the majority, like if you have the mindset of I'm not wasting your time and money, and you get those hour hungry pilots
Yeah.
who they will waste your time and money because they just like they're worried if you graduate or you get your check ride, they won't have a student now.
Right.
So that's their income. They don't have income now. Like
Yeah.
it's a hard balance
Yeah.
for a lot of people.
Yeah.
So with the um cadet programs, have you done a lot of research into those?
I'm starting to do a lot more because I'm at that point. Yeah, I've done a fair amount.
So, my understanding, you sign a contract with a cadet program,
Hmm.
and if you're a CFI, do you have to be at one of their CFI schools
If it's a partner school, then
if
yes.
it's a partner school? Now, I know some offer it without partner schools.
Yeah.
Right.
SkyWest is one of those.
Yeah. So what they do is they pay you on top of your instructor hours, right? or is that only with partner schools?
I don't
Like
believe.
they'll offer. I've seen a few of the contracts where it's like, look, you join the cadet program, you're a CFI at one of our partnering schools, we'll
Yeah,
pay you $20 an hour or for flight time on top of your CFI pay.
haven't heard that.
You haven't seen those ones,
Mm-mm.
but maybe they've gone away. 'Cause this was 5 years ago.
Yeah, yeah. I know that Envoy, for example, will give you. They have two interviews. One is like the initial, and then as soon as that you can do the initial interview as soon as you have your commercial, and then as soon as you have your CFI, you can do their second interview where you officially become a cadet with them. The hours at that point that you accumulate are going towards your seniority
Mhm.
at Envoy, and so which is super nice because then you get there and you already have
Yeah,
500 hours of whatever flight time. Um, and then in addition to that, they give you like a $15,000 bonus at that point.
gotcha. So
Um,
you're like a $15,000 salary for the year
mhm.
for however long it takes you to get through
Yeah,
CFI
which,
or
yeah,
1,500 hours or
hmm
whatever. Gotcha.
which is great because a lot of, and you can do multiple cadet programs. You don't have to necessarily, you can, I mean, you commit to them, right?
Yeah.
But you can always just say never mind later
Yeah.
on. They might ask for the 15K back, but like,
Which that's the tricky part, right? Because there was a lot of, at least when I was starting training and got through CFI, so 5 years ago, it was like, yeah, we're going to offer you a $70,000 bonus
uh-huh,
essentially to
yeah,
get through your 1,500 hours.
hmm
If you leave, you owe us what we paid you and the remaining amount of the contract
dang, yeah,
because you're contracted to that. And then when that hiring splurge went off and all salaries increased. So one thing that I've learned, it might have changed. So correct me if I'm wrong, but when you sign up, you're signing up for the set salary when you start flying with them and that bonus.
um, I don't believe so. I just talked to one of my old CFIs that's flying with Envoy right now, and he said that they're paying um, $94 an hour, and then after they've completed training, then or in July, he said it's supposed to get bumped up to 98 an hour,
Okay.
something like that. So I think it can go up. I don't
But
know if you're fixed to
but
that.
it's contracted, I think. And that's
Yeah,
where the like my hard part with signing, because I was going to sign with a few airliners,
yeah,
an airliner. I didn't know which one I was going to pick, but this was the issue back then, at least, was you signed up. So yeah, let's say it was like $90 an hour to start,
mm-hmm,
and then it went up to 98 when you hit so many hours.
mm-hmm,
But if that changed later on, you can't get the higher pay because you're contracted for however many years,
mm-hmm,
right? 3 to 5 years.
yeah,
So I had a buddy who he signed up with, I think, SkyWest or something, or I don't know, can't remember.
yeah,
And he was contracted at like 75,000 a year, and then you get the hourly pay on top of that, so forth. And then when the hiring splurge went off and SkyWest, they bumped it to 120.
dang, that sucks for him.
But he's contracted for 3 years when he starts flying with them, so it didn't start yet, right? Because
Mm-hmm,
he's just a CFI. So when he started, then he'd have to go 3 years at that 75,000 or the pay scale increase. Even though people just starting are doing 120 with
yeah,
the pay scale increase, almost doubling what he was going to get paid just off the get go.
yeah. Yeah, and I think at that point it's tempting to be greedy at that point and to compare, right?
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, like if you committed to 70 grand, like you should be okay with that because that's what you were okay
Yeah.
with back then. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? I think it's really easy for people to get frustrated and then you start not liking your job
Yeah.
because you're like, oh, this guy next to me is making 120 and blah
Yeah.
blah blah. And it's like, yeah, that sucks. But like you can't focus on that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, you definitely don't chase the money. I mean,
Right.
you'll get stuck somewhere you hate.
Yeah.
But yeah, my opinion was like, don't ever sign up with anybody until you're ready to work with them.
That's a good.
But then you have other people that are like, oh no, this was the greatest option I could have picked.
Yeah.
So I think just evaluate your options.
For sure. And see what kind of requirements
Yeah.
they have and
Yeah. Because then because on top of that is like, you might get into like a corporate gig or a charter operation and
Mhm.
love it and want to be there the rest of your life,
Yeah.
and then, but you sign a contract. Like, I know you can break contracts, but it can get
There's
difficult.
penalized, yeah.
Yeah. So it just depends on what route you want to go. And I was thinking airliner forever, and then I changed my mind. I don't want to do airliners ever now. Like
Hmm.
that's not even in the scope of my horizon.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah.
So, and then so what's your goal moving? After you hit, let's say 1,500 hours or 1,000 hours, are you set on airliners? Do you want to move?
Yeah, so when I was out in Ohio, I met a recruiter for NetJets,
Mhm.
which is a lot of people don't know this, but it's actually the biggest airline in the world. The reason you haven't heard about it is because it's just private,
Yeah.
and so basically people pay a subscription to have access to their 2,000 jets or whatever they have, and then they can fly privately. Super expensive, really, for rich people. Elon Musk uses them.
Yeah.
Um, and so I met him when I was flying out there, and he gave me a tour of their headquarters, which is in Columbus, and I really liked it. So that's kind of the goal right now, especially because one of the big benefits is that I can live close to any major city, so I can stay here
Yeah.
in Utah if me and my wife decide to do that, and and the pay is okay, and yeah,
Yeah.
so
What
that's
are
the
their
goal right
hiring
now.
minimums? If
Um, I need to look at them again because I think they've recently changed. I'm part of a group that talks about it. Um, I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah.
I mean, from at least my understanding, it's sub 1,000. Like you can get hired at like
Yeah.
800 hours or something
Yeah.
like that,
I
right?
believe that's true.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can find it.
Yeah, I think it's like 750 or 800, and then obviously your resume looks better if you have instrument time, actual, and a lot of nighttime.
Yeah, but they are definitely
And they
the
fly
choice.
PC-12s, right?
Hmm.
Yeah. Do they have the PC-24s you can step up into?
I'm not sure. I
Yeah.
need to look at.
There's a company, PlaneSense. Yeah, I think PlaneSense. They're kind of like a Next Jets, and you start in the PC-12, you can go Captain PC-12, or you can step up into the PC-24, and they'll get your turbine training done,
Mm.
which is cool.
Yeah, it's not very specific, to be
Yeah.
honest, here on their website.
But another thing, you went and talked to him. The recruiter.
Yeah.
You saw their facility. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
So
Well, and it's a luxury company.
yeah,
It's they're very much about the experience, and yeah,
yeah.
it's
I've had a few
nice.
buddies who flew with them. They really liked it,
Yeah.
and a lot of them stayed with them longer, till like 2,000 to 2,500 hours. They just kept flying with them before they went airliners.
Yeah, which I think again, it's all about who you know, and I think that NetJets for me could be a great opportunity um to get to know a lot of different people that are influential people,
Yeah,
and hopefully if I can find a job as a private pilot for someone later down the road, I would take that
yeah,
in a heartbeat. So I'm not
yeah.
necessarily set on airlines at all.
I knew a guy. He flew for a company like NextJets, and he ended up meeting the owner of the Houston Rockets, the basketball team.
Cool. Yeah.
And then he got him in touch with the chief pilot of because they had their own airliner, basically.
Uh-huh.
And so now he's flying first officer for the Rockets airplane, which is nice because it's seasonal. So,
Cool.
which is cool. Yeah, you just meet people, right?
So this guy on this page, and who knows how reliable this is, right? But he said that he got hired at 950
Yeah,
um with 75 hours of multi-time. So
yeah.
we'll see.
I think most of those, like the minimum is 750. Now, if you get hired at that point, it might be rare, but
Yeah.
I think
Right.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's the insurance requirement for a lot of those because they're technically a charter,
Right.
right? So they're 135 operation. But um, so we hear this a lot with CFIs. I don't know if you felt it yet, but burnout in flight training and flight instructing. Um,
Yeah.
and then kind of like the sub part are CFIs and students hitting a breaking point.
It's been interesting. So I love teaching. I think
Yeah,
that's something that I found out about myself in the past few years, especially teaching at UVU. I love to see students progress and be able to understand concepts. I like especially teaching because it helps me solidify my understanding of certain topics. Um, and so for a long time, like I was fine. I would teach the same thing over and over and I didn't care too much. Recently though, I would definitely say that um, explaining the same thing over and over and over and over again to different people or to the same people um, does get a little bit tiresome. Um, but then you have milestones like I had a student had their first solo last week, and you see that, and you're like, wow, what I'm doing is so worth it. They just flew a plane all by themselves. I taught them how to do that,
Yeah.
right? And that is so rewarding that it for me it outweighs the um the dryness that
Yeah.
can come.
What's more the mental and emotional side of being a flight instructor that's often overlooked in your opinion?
Yeah, I think for me at least, and I know a lot of CFIs are a little bit different, I really try to be intentional about the flights that I have with my students. So I let them know way beforehand. Like I say, this is what we're going to do. Study this, make sure I like to have productive flights. So for me, the biggest stress is before the flight even happens. I'm like, okay, what do I say to them? How can we prepare for this flight? How can I prepare for this flight? Because I don't want to be up in the air with a student and then I'm like, oh, should we do this or should we do this? Or like, what's a good way to phrase this? I want to already have that in my head,
Yeah.
And I want to, like, a student had a problem with landings for a really long time. And I'm like, how do I teach that? So I do research beforehand. And for me, that is the most emotionally taxing part of being a CFI is the prep. And I know a lot of CFIs don't do that.
Yeah.
But for me, that's definitely that side. As far as physical stuff goes, it's my butt gets sore, but
Not
when
eating.
I have a couple of times, yeah, a couple of flights in a day and I haven't eaten, and I'm like, oh shoot, I'm safe,
Yeah.
like I got to eat something. But
Yeah. I think that's what makes a good CFI versus a bad CFI. One, being able to turn any moment in the airplane into a teaching moment, like on the fly.
yeah,
I think that's just a good instructor, like in any sense, right?
right,
In any realm of instructing, whether you're a instructor for a sales group or an airline instructor, right?
definitely,
Is being able to convert every moment into a teaching moment. Uh, I don't think a lot of people have that skill. It's not a natural skill, I
yeah,
don't think, and then also just the ability to stay prepared
hmm
where, like you said, I don't think there's, I would say like more than 60% of instructors don't prepare for their flights. One, I mean, I think a lot of them get into the
sure,
rhythm
which is
of it
totally
and they don't have to
respectable,
prepare as
right,
much. But you do always get those students where you're just like, I cannot figure out what's wrong with him. I
yeah,
cannot figure out why they're not learning this concept, and so you have to go learn different ways to teach that
right,
in order for it to click. And I think a lot of the times they just say, well, just need to pass them off to a different instructor. I see that a lot.
yeah,
Where if you're a good instructor, you're going to be able to manipulate or mold your teaching method to anybody.
which is crucial,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that it's very difficult to do. I mean, I give props to any instructor who can do that and have a good track record of doing that with many
hmm
different students. I saw that with you where we were able to give you students that have already been flying with us, where you're taking a mid training.
hmm
That's the hardest one to do, in my opinion.
yeah, for
Because,
sure. They have a lot of interesting habits.
yep, interesting habits, interesting things that they do. You're also not sure exactly where they are, so you got to figure out how to incorporate like a recap flight into it,
hmm
without backtracking.
Totally.
So, I mean, it's not an easy job, and I think that
Yeah.
that alone is overlooked by anybody who's getting into this field, right? Is like they come into it thinking, oh yeah, anybody can do it, right? Or I've learned it. I'm sure I can teach it.
Right.
No, it's not the
It's
case.
completely different. Yeah. Yeah. I think being a CFI, and it's completely natural. People are like, oh, how can I get my hours and get paid doing it? CFI is a great option. You can learn a ton, get a lot of really great practice for the airline so that when you get there, it's easier for sure than somebody that's just flying in circles, burning holes. But you also have to recognize that the amount of work that has to be done as a CFI is a lot. It's teaching, a lot of times people like teachers at schools, there's so much prep time beforehand that we don't get paid for, which is fine,
Yeah.
but you have to expect that and you have to recognize that there's a lot more you need to learn before you can teach.
Yeah. And you definitely learn the most in your first couple flights.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I remember you coming back like, I didn't even know I knew all this.
Yeah.
you know? But uh, one thing I didn't want with our school is that grind culture of
Mhm.
just grind it out, like just come in from sunrise to sunset, even some night flights, and
Mhm.
just and I see that that's where the burnout comes a lot from
Mm,
with these other programs. I don't know how UVU has it structured, but I see so many instructors get burnt out because they have to be there every single day.
yeah.
They're flying that max 8 hours. If they're not, they're in trouble. You know,
Mm,
that's one thing I didn't want here. We obviously want you flying as much as possible. I think you want to fly as much as possible,
definitely.
but
Yeah.
there comes a limit of like where the wellness of your own being
For sure.
needs to be evaluated.
For sure. Yeah, it's like anything, it's you have to have especially as a CFI, you need to have a well-rounded life. And it's super easy to get sucked into, oh, I have a flight at 8 a.m. and then I'm just gonna stack all my flights and then I'll get home at, you know, 9 p.m. or
Yeah,
something. Super easy to do that. And it's a great way to get hours. But then you have to think two things. One, am I healthy? Am I safe doing this? Is this sustainable for a long period of time? And then two, is this good for my students? Because you get to your third or fourth student of the day and you're like banging your head against the canopy. It's like, that's just, you got to be able to give your best to your student. And if you can't do that on your third or fourth flight, then don't do that. Don't
yeah,
schedule them out that day.
yeah. It's a good point. Do you think flight training should be treated as like a trade school or a college outside of the 141 programs?
Like as a trade school or a college.
Yeah. Like, well, or either or. Like,
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
you can go in and get a certificate degree
Yeah. I
in
understand.
massage therapy and it counts as a degree.
Right.
Like I don't know why at this point in time flight training hasn't been categorized as that.
I find that, so I'm just barely finishing up my degree, and I would say probably 60, 70% of my classes have been very fruitless.
Yeah.
And I think that in general, like that's a whole nother topic of universities and kind of how they're going a little bit. But I think in general, there's a lot of things that universities can teach you, but there's a lot of things that they do very poorly on. And I
Yeah.
think, in my opinion, uh, aviation is there's better ways to teach aviation than in a classroom.
Yeah.
To check a box for a degree.
Yeah. Now, like, I hope they push for this later on is like, we put in so many hours in the airplane. I mean, by
Hmm.
the time you're done, 250 hours, you've done what, times two that on ground training
Right.
for all
At
of the
least times two.
writtens,
Yeah.
right? I mean, each ground course is like 40 to 60 hours,
Yeah.
depending on which one you pick.
Hmm.
Uh, at the end of it, we probably have more hours sitting in a classroom with us, right,
Hmm.
or a ground course than most doctors probably do.
Yeah.
Like, it in turn, we just do it in such a short amount of time. Like, wouldn't it be nice to come out with your commercial certificate and a trade school degree?
Yeah.
I mean, I think it just would
I
make
think that'd be
sense.
awesome. Yeah. Yeah. Especially if it was structured like that, I think. Because I think a lot of 161 or Part 61 schools will um, just leave the ground kind of up to the student. So if it is structured into the program, then I think that'd be a great
Yeah.
thing to get a certificate along with it.
Yeah. I don't know how to get that.
I don't know. Above my pay grade, honestly.
Yeah. I don't know how you get that because I mean, like, there's plumbing schools, there's, like I said,
Right.
massage therapy schools, there's all these different schools. Utah's a big one for those. They have a lot of colleges, a lot of trade schools here.
Hair
Um,
school.
why not have a trade school program for flight training?
Yeah.
I don't know why.
I don't know. Yeah. It's a good thought.
um, Now I know you haven't sent any of your own students to check rides yet. They're getting close. but you've been through a bunch of check rides. Do you think check rides are too subjective?
Too subjective.
Yeah,
Um, Subjective in the sense like it's different per student or per DPE. The
per
DPE is
DPE.
very different.
Yeah,
Um,
because there's a lot of frustration with the check ride process,
yeah, for sure. And
right?
I've heard a lot of things outside of Utah. People are getting really frustrated because a lot of DPEs are charging like $2,000 for
Yeah,
their check ride, and then yeah, there's lots of horror stories, of course. I think in Utah it's pretty fair. I would say it's pretty standard for the DPs. I think we have pretty good
yeah.
DPs here.
No, I would agree. Yeah. Now, but with that being said, they might be good, but what about the inconsistencies between each DPE? Like, a lot of places they train for whatever DPE they're going to get, which
Yeah,
I think like if there was more consistency on how they grade, how they evaluate,
there wouldn't be
there
as much
wouldn't
of
be a
a
need to study each DPE. I know they follow the guidelines that's in the PT, the ACS, guidelines.
right.
Um, but that doesn't necessarily always correlate to a DPE.
Yeah, that is 100% true. Um, there's channels with Utah DPE gouges that people do a check ride with a certain DPE and then they throw their gouge up. And it is extremely similar to like I've had multiple students that have gone through UVU that are like, yeah, it was this gouge was my check ride
Yeah.
that I got that was 2 months ago. So um I definitely think that people, as soon as you figure out who your check ride is with, you start training to have a check ride for that DPE.
Yeah.
When theoretically, you should be able to have a check ride with any DPE.
Yeah.
But then there was a DPE that was known for a long time as the Terminator because he failed like 70% of his applicants,
Yeah.
which like that means that you're doing something that a lot of DPEs aren't, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Now, do you think that comes from a training standpoint? Like us as CFI should change how we train where we're not training to a DPE? And it's just like, look, it doesn't matter who you get, as long as you do this, you should pass. Right?
It's hard to do.
I know it's hard because the industry, like
Yeah.
this training industry, has gone that way, right? So it's like, how do you switch that to train to any DPE without running into the chances of failing because they asked you some stupid question on the oral.
Right. Exactly. And I think that's where the hard thing is that there's such a plethora of, especially on the oral, there's so much information that could go into. And for example, there's one DP here in Utah that loves to talk about GPS and how WAS and RAIM and all that stuff works. And so we go really hard into that. But then what if that day they chose to go really, really in depth into icing and weather and anti and de-icing systems?
Yeah.
Then you're screwed because you
Yeah.
went really hard on GPS, right? And I think it'd be extremely hard to go really in depth on all of these topics. Like as a CFII teaching instrument ground, there's so much that I'm learning every time I teach.
Yeah.
So much. There's so much information for the instrument ground. And so it's really hard to, as soon as you figure out who you have, you say, oh, they like to do this, they like to do this, they like to do this. So let's harp on those. And they never really talk about this. So we won't touch on that too much,
Now, do you think there's a lax on training at that point?
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, let's just say like every student was mandatory. They had to do 100 hours of training, ground training, for instrument.
Okay.
I feel like that would give them enough in depth on all topics.
Right.
But that's not the standard, right? There is no ground standard technically. You only need 2 hours,
I don't remember. Yeah, but something
according to the guidelines.
Yeah.
Like there's no standard. Like if there was a change in how many hours as an instructor we have to do with our students, whether that's an online ground course and us, like if that standard was 100, yes, all prices would increase. You'd have to increase them.
Yeah.
But would that open them up to a better possibility of knowing it all? I mean, essentially they should know it all.
Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think that would be much easier. But then, like you said, you run into issues with pricing and then time. Yeah. If you do 100 hours of ground, like 2 hours a day, if you go more than 2 hours a day on ground, it's hard.
I know.
And if you do 2 hours every day, that's still a lot.
Yeah.
So it would take a long time
Yeah.
to do.
I mean, the ground's definitely the hardest thing to consistently do
Hmm.
because it's so boring.
Super boring.
I mean,
Everyone
even
hates
if
it.
you're a book nerd,
Yeah.
and you love it, like to do that much training or studying is a
Yeah.
lot.
Well, and even like whenever I teach, I feel like I'm pretty animated. I like,
Yeah.
and a lot of my students are like, oh, it's nice to have somebody that's like energetic when they're teaching. But then I still have students that are totally nodding off in the
Yeah.
ground, and I'm like, I get it. It's
Yeah.
tough.
Now, if there was a little bit more of a standard on DPEs, like I get asked, I've heard questions about a DUAT.
What's that? Yeah, I don't know.
It's a weather source.
Okay.
It's a way of gathering weather information.
Hmm.
But we had a DP in Texas who asked that on every check ride.
Yeah.
It's not even in service anymore.
Yeah. Interesting.
So if you had a standard of like, okay, it has to be relevant in the last 5 years,
Yeah.
has to be, obviously within the ACS or whatever one you're using.
Hmm.
Um, and then like, I don't know, I think there should be a level of standards for DPs and then accountability for them, right? Because right now the only accountability is you have to fail every 1 in 3 students,
Yeah, that's crazy.
right? You
And
can't
they
have,
have a yearly
yeah,
like a sit-in for their check rides and stuff.
yeah. Like you can't, if you have more than a 70% pass rate, you're going to get multiple of those sit-ins.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. I think too, a lot of DPEs like CFIs, they start to get a little burnt out, I imagine, and they do the same thing over and over again. So that's when they start to come up with those questions. They're like gotcha questions.
Yeah.
Hopefully that they don't fail students based off of those gotcha
Yeah.
questions. Because a lot of times they're just like, hey, let me show you something that I know that you don't know.
Yeah.
On my CFI check ride, he asked me tons of stuff about like very particular little things. And I could tell that he was just trying to show off a little bit.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great, show off. Like, teach me something. Because I kind of got the vibe that he wanted to do that. So part of it too is I think reading your DPE, knowing what's in the ACS. Because I know one of my students he this is kind of crazy, but he took one of his private pilot DPE to court because he asked questions that were outside of the ACS.
Oh, wow.
And then he ended up winning the settlement. So
It's crazy.
but that only comes right if you know what's in the ACS and you're like, I know that they are at least going to ask this, this, and this, and this.
Yeah.
So I'll be really prepared with those. If it's anything outside of that, they can't fail me off of that.
Yeah.
Right.
That's a good point. But then again, it's like, how do you argue with your DPE?
Yeah. It's hard.
Yeah. I've
Especially
always been
private
prepared.
pilot.
Yeah. I've always been prepared as the CFI
Right.
to go and fight them on something. Like if they're asking some stupid question that has no relevance to the check ride, it's like I don't see the need of that,
Yeah.
But I also think that 70% pass rate has also put a hard part on the DPE
For sure.
where they have to fail someone.
Yeah.
But then on the flip, I think training has gotten better with
For
all
sure.
of the online ground courses where you like they're so in depth
Yeah.
and they've refined it over I think what Sporties has been around for 25 years of ground courses, like they've refined this down to be perfect.
Yeah.
I think training is just better. So I would expect more people to pass.
Yeah.
But that standard hasn't changed in all the years of DPEs being around.
Yeah.
Yeah,
it's a tough balance.
Yeah. But then you get those easy DPEs and you're like, you're guaranteed to pass,
Right.
unless you really mess up.
Right.
So it's like, well, if everybody started picking them,
Well, yeah, I could hear a check ride like a month ago, a private pilot check ride, and it was like the DPE was walking the student through the check ride. The student was prepared. He knew his stuff. But it was a discussion. It was like, oh, and let me show you this one thing that's interesting about this. And it was extremely easy. I was like, man, if every check ride is like that, no problem.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah. I also have the issue with like if a DP is in a bad mood that day.
Yeah.
He can easily choose to just fail you.
Yeah.
Because he felt like it.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't agree with it. Maybe once I become a DP, I can change.
Yeah, you got to get on that. Yeah.
That's the goal. So, on the ground side, because you've sent a lot of people to check rides after you've done grounds with them.
Right.
What's the biggest thing you have them prepare for, or that you try to steer them towards, and making sure they're really ready?
Um, this is mentioned a ton, but digging yourself into holes. You always, always, always listen to the question that's been asked, and you figure out an answer that will answer their question in as little words as possible. And if they ask you to expound, great.
Yeah.
I had a student that just barely had his check ride, a private pilot check ride, and the DPE asked, "What kind of equipment is required for our flight today?" Right, classic question. And he said, "Oh, you're referring to 91205 A flames." And then he said, "Would you like me to open that up?" And the DP said, "No, sounds like you know it." They moved on.
Yeah.
So it's really easy to go in and say, okay, you need your altimeter, you need this, you need this, you need this. And then our landing gear position indicator isn't required because our landing gear's fixed. And you could just talk and talk
Yeah.
forever. So digging yourself into holes, and then you mess up and you say something like, "Oh, and your anti-collision lights, but those are only required for nighttime." And then they're like, "Oh,
Oh.
is that true?" And they're like, yeah. And then you spend 15 minutes looking at it, and then you realize that it's on both automated flames and flaps. And anyway, so and then you have to look up the reg for it has to be on 24/7, whatever. And so just being patient when you're answering questions, listening to what they're saying, asking for clarification, and then giving a very simple answer.
Yeah. That's exactly what I would tell my students.
Yeah.
That, and then just be confident in your answers.
Yeah.
So if they ask you, "Are you sure?" It's yes, I'm sure. Like, be confident if you're going to answer it. You already got it wrong if you got it wrong.
It's true.
There's no walking it back.
Yeah, watch for facial expressions. And sometimes DPs are better at masking. Whenever I do mock check rides with my students, they always know when they said something because I'll be like,
"Really? That's odd.
Like, where did you get that from?"
Yeah. All right. So we'll finish this up here in just a second. What's so far? Do you have any crazy flight experiences with students or on your own?
Crazy in what way? Are you trying to?
Scary?
Okay.
Exciting? I don't know. Something. What's the most memorable flight experience? That can be good or bad. A lot of bad ones.
I mean, I just have bad ones that kind of come to my mind.
That's fine.
I'll tell a good one first. The one of my most favorite flights I've ever had was when I was doing my instrument, and we got actual, which is really hard in Utah, and it was just like the coolest feeling in the world. It's like pure blue sky. You have this big white cloud, and you just go right through it, and it was just like magical. Yeah, super, super
Flying
awesome.
actual is very fun.
Very fun.
Yeah.
And then you get into it, and you're like, "Are we even flying right now?
Yeah.
Like, are we in a simulator?" Because we're like a little turbulence maybe, but it wasn't. It was pretty smooth,
Yeah.
but that was an awesome, awesome day. And then as far as like scary experiences, most of my students are very cautious, and they don't do anything that's too scary for me. But I did have one student when we were coming into land, and it was at nighttime, and it was like one of their first times landing at nighttime, so it was a little bit, I don't know, different for them, I suppose. And we were coming into land. They've had great landings, and then suddenly he just steps on the left rudder, and we're like 10 feet above the ground. We start yawing, and I'm like, "What is that?" So, yeah, always be prepared. You never know what they're going to do sometimes.
Well, I think that's one thing a lot of people don't realize when we're flying, we're not just sitting back and relaxing.
Oh, yeah.
I mean,
you're constantly like,
even an
okay.
experienced pilot who can land and fly will still freak you out at one point.
Mm-hmm.
There's just no way around it.
Yeah.
Well, mine's pretty similar to that one. It got a little bit freakier, but I'll share that another time. Because I know if he ever watched this, he'll know exactly who I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So, all right, Connor. Well, thanks for coming in.
Yeah.
Appreciate it.
Happy to
You're
be
here
here
every day for the most part. So, anybody who wants a sweet instructor, come to Utah
Hit me
Aviate.
up.
He wants more students, so
Yeah.
we got to get him filled up. But yeah, anything else? You good?
No, I'm good.
Okay.
Thanks so much.
Awesome, man. Thanks for coming in. Oops.
And we're back.